Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Silver Bullion Television, SBTV. I'm your host, Patrick Vieira. Today we have with us Iustin Rosioara, who is the author of God's Money, an in-depth examination of the Bible verses that mention gold and silver. A fascinating read about what the ancient Bible text really says about gold, silver, and money. For the writing of this book, Iustin dedicated thousands of hours to studying money, currencies, credit, and precious metals. He has a diploma from Tomar School of Ministry in Bucharest, Romania, and he's taken an accredited course in Biblical Hebrew through the Israel Institute of Bible Studies. And we are delighted to have him here today as our guest. Good day, Iustin, and welcome to SBTV. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm fine. I'm very glad to be with you here.
Great.
Thank you.
We're glad you came on. We're glad we have you. Before we go into the discussion on gold and silver, I hope our audience can know a bit more about you. I understand you grew up in communist Romania.
Yes, that's right. I was born and grew up in communist Romania. This is why I have this funny accent. And at the age of 25, 26, I moved to Norway, lived there for 12 years. Then I moved back to Romania to start some business So when the communism was over, I moved to Norway, and after 12 years moved back to Romania, and there were some very good opportunities, growth, the transition from communist to a market economy. And then for some years ago, like 6 years ago, I moved to the United States.
Your experience growing up in a communist country, what was it like, and how much freedom did people have or not have?
Well, well, you had the freedom to choose, like to buy between three types of toothpaste. You had so actually, we can joke about it, but it was not no freedom at all. We are not even allowed to travel, even if we had some money to. Everything was so controlled, everything was so planned that every single life, everybody had the same salary for the same type of work with the same work experience. And there was no incentive to do anything. There was no incentive to achieve anything because, it didn't pay off. So, and at the end, the results are showing, that everything is scarcity everywhere because the people don't dare to do anything.
What got you interested in gold and silver? Was the discussion of precious metals prevalent in Romania at that time?
No, not really, but it was something we knew about gold. It's like if we had jewelry, we could not buy bullions or coins or anything else like that. But we are allowed to buy some jewelry, and it was mainly private market. People were selling. Private market means individuals. There were no private enterprise at all. So we knew that gold is special in some way. It was an attractiveness to it, and it was because it was scarce and it was desirable. Everybody wanted to have something, either some rings or some earrings, and the same with silver. We had silverware that was put in a box somewhere in a cabinet, and it was used only on special occasions. Otherwise, we used stainless steel devices. So we knew that something is special with that. So, but my interest in that at that time was not special. Maybe I wanted to have a couple of nicer rings, and people were using a lot to put gold teeth. They used it for dentures, but that was basically all at that time.
Let's talk about the concept of money to you. In your book, God's Money, you recount a moment in the mid-90s when you first noticed the £5 note, and there was a statement on it that said, "I promise to pay bearer on demand the sum of £5." Can you share with us that episode and how it started your journey to question what money is?
Well, yeah, because as I grew up in communism, and I didn't believe in the values that communism promotes. When I had the chance to move in 1991 to Norway, I experienced the market economy. But for me, it was more like, okay, it was a good move, materially speaking, because, I was operating in a market economy, I had a good job and all that. And money was just something, okay, I get a paycheck, I do something with the money that I get, and that's all. And then it was there, yeah, when I was transited on the airport in Heathrow, I got that £5 bill, and I read that statement that was kind of intriguing because it says, yeah, I promise to pay to the bearer of demand on demand the amount of £5. And I was looking, is like, okay, I thought I got the £5. And I knew somewhere in my mind that a pound is a measure of weight. And it's like, okay, so do I have the £5 or not? What is with that premise? So where do I take this paper to the treasury to get £5? So that is how it started me to think, actually, those pieces of paper that we use for exchange, what is that? Where is the connection between the pounds? What's the difference between the pounds and the promise that I'm looking at? So that is how I started to investigate and understand the difference between money and currencies.
So when you see a $1 or a $10 bill or note, do you think of that as money?
No, I can just look at it as a medium exchange, because you see, there is the same amount of, basically the same amount of paper and ink can produce a value of $1, $10, $5, 10, 20, or 100. Okay, the $100 bills, they have more color, and but still there is no connection between the material that is in the paper and ink and the value that is on the face value of it. So it's all about, to me, it's just an image. So when we hold a paper bill, whatever denomination it is, it can be dollar, it can be euro, it can be yen or Swiss franc, that is just an image of perceived value. So I define those currencies as just an image of perceived value. And it's okay as long everybody has the same perception and everybody has the same faith in that piece of paper that will produce economic value. That's what makes it move around.
Ron Paul, he said in his book, The Case for Gold, the word dollar quite literally is legally meaningless, and it has been meaningless for the past decade. Federal Reserve notes are not dollars. They are notes denominated in dollars. But what a dollar is, no one knows. And the context of his statement was that a US dollar used to be defined in a precise weight of silver or gold. Would you agree that money should be defined as a weight of a hard asset like gold and silver?
Yeah, I definitely agree, because gold and silver, okay, what makes material, if we take first, generally speaking, of all materials, we call it commodities, or what makes them valuable? Number one is scarcity, how difficult it is to find them. And second is attractiveness. And when I talk about scarcity, we also involve the work. I'm thinking also about the work involved to find it, to extract it, to purify it. So there is a connection between these elements and what is perceived as valuable. So it's the material component of it. So when we exchange, it's very important that we exchange things of the same nature. So materials like silver and gold, they are the most interesting or the most attractive mediums of exchange, because they contain not just matter, substance, but also the work that is involved. So when I go to work somewhere, I have a job, and get a paycheck, now I get a paycheck that actually I get some numbers in the bank's computers. It's not even pieces of paper anymore. So I put something that is tangible, which is my time, my skills, my knowledge. I put it to my employer, and I get in exchange some immaterial numbers with some labels attached to it. So that's an unfair exchange. And coming back to your question about gold and silver, if I would be paid in something that has material component in it, then it's a fair exchange, because I put labor and I get something, and I use some material in my work, then I get in exchange kind of the same nature of the things. So that's why I'm a very strong advocate for having material money. And of course, gold and silver is the most suitable for that because of the value.
I hear you. Completely agree. Gold and silver in the Bible. It's one thing to be interested in precious metals and the topic of money, but it is another to start digging into the Bible and learning more about gold and silver. Why did you choose to look at the Bible to learn more about gold and silver, and how credible is the Bible as a source material?
Okay, you can consider it the Word of God, the sacred text, but it's also the best history book because it records people. That was written by people who lived over a time span of over 2,000 years. So that records events, habits, all kind of even transactions with very clear details that no other history book has ever recorded. So that is by far the best history book. So even if you don't consider it a sacred text, it still has the history value. And this is the first thing. And answer to your second question. The first question was about why did I start to look in the Bible? Because following that episode in Heathrow, when I started to search for the value of money, what is money, I started to look into different economic theories. And you find a lot of, you have the advocates, the Austrian economy that advocates for sound money, and you have on the other, at the other end, you have these monetary theories, especially the new modern monetary theories with stimulus packages and debasing the currencies and quantitative easing and so on. So what I tried to do was to look at the debates. And I found out that looking at those debates, actually, I got more confused after each debate because everybody had their opinions, and some things made sense, some things didn't. And then I figured out, okay, now mankind doesn't have an answer because we had humanity around for thousands of years, billions of people making transactions every single day. And we don't know what works and what doesn't. So it's clear that mankind doesn't have an answer. So that's why I decided to look into the Bible. Because I said, maybe there is something there.
From your research in your book, let me hold up your book so people can see it. From your research in your book, God's Money, did you find out the purpose why God created gold and silver, and what do these metals represent in the Bible?
Yeah, there is a purpose, and it starts in the beginning when we're told that gold is good. And if we look let me say one thing first, that when I started to study, I started to look also in the original Hebrew text. And because that is, there are different words that have different meanings, but sometimes the same word has different meaning. And that means that those concepts that are defined by the same word, They are strongly related. So when we're told that gold is good right in the beginning,
Yes.
that word good actually also defines a purpose. So everything that when God says that things are good is not because he was happy with what he achieved, but is to tell us that there is a purpose behind the thing that is good. And actually, there is I go to large extent in the book, as you probably are aware of, that to describe what is the purpose of it. And it goes back to the fact that God made the matter and mankind is supposed to bring the work. So these two things together create economic value, because we are supposed to be here on this earth and make everything grow in a sustainable manner. And that is, mankind has a mandate for growth, and for a management for growth. And these two things combined, matter and work, are the ones that create prosperity for mankind. But again, it's a matter of doing it in a responsible manner and in a sustainable manner. So we have gold, which is kind of the supreme value because of the rarity, but also because of purity. Mm. Gold does not combine chemically with other elements, so it's we can put it in an alloy together with copper to get jewelry of different grades, but there is no chemical combination between gold and the metal, the copper that we put together with. On the other hand, silver, the word for silver and money is the same word in Hebrew. It's kesef. And that's not the only language where silver and money are defined by the same word. Probably in French we have the word argent, which means the same. So it's clear that silver and money are the same thing in the Bible. So why these two? One is the gold symbolizes purity, righteousness, because it doesn't combine with anything else. And silver, being used for exchange or trade, also symbolizes redemption.
So when we hear that God said the gold is good, are we talking the purity? Was that gold 9999, or did he mean it's good where it's something that we can be used as money or some type of a payment for our labor?
The purpose is to be used as wealth accumulation, because that gold is good. That word tov that is there, it means not only good, but it means that it serves a purpose, but it also means welfare. And welfare is not in the context of having a form of social security or some benefits from the government. Is to fare well in life.
Was there anywhere in the Bible where God commanded the use of gold and silver to be money?
There are different places where God asks specifics to be used as medium of exchange. And there are different verses that can support that. But I want to focus on one thing. Why would God want us to use this? Is because, you see, when we talk about economic value or assets, we have two types of assets. We have assets that have intrinsic value, and we have assets that have counterparty risk. So assets with intrinsic value they are those assets that are that don't depend on someone else's ability to produce anything. So gold is the best example of asset with intrinsic value, because when you exchange, use gold and silver for exchange, you are exchanging an asset that has its value connected to itself. So the nature of gold and silver provide the value. The value of a transaction is given by the amount or the weight of gold and silver that moves hands. But in the moment you move that piece of metal from one ownership to another, then there is nobody else involved. In the moment we move other assets, be it currencies, be it debt notes, central bank notes, there are notes, so there are liabilities, so we transfer liability. So God wanted us to use these metals as money because they do not request any other condition. So because God is the only one that can make unconditional promises. We can make only conditional promises. I can promise, okay, my employer can promise to pay me a paycheck if he has money, which means that if the customers are paying on time, the customers are buying goods only if they have use for them and if their businesses can operate further. If I get my paycheck, then I can commit myself to go to the bank and buy a house with a mortgage. So all this is a chain of, all these transactions are chains of conditional promises, except for when we use metals, because then it's like in the moment we exchange the metal, then the transaction is closed and we don't depend on anybody else. So there are several ways when several places in the Bible where God demanded use of gold and silver, both as money, but also as in the building of different structures, for the same reason that they have to reflect the nature of unconditional promise.
And when God said the gold is good, way back in Genesis, how important is that first mention of gold and silver in the Bible?
Well, this is about how we interpret the Bible, and there are several rules. And rule of first mention is very important, because when a word is mentioned for the first time, then we can look at the context because it shows the main application. So that's why when it was mentioned that gold is good, and that good means also purpose and wealth, then it means also that is the main application of gold. But also we have to understand that happened before the sin came in the world, and then we have another reference like about the silver. The first time the word is mentioned is about Abraham, where he was rich in cattle, silver, and gold. So those are important because the first time a word is mentioned, that gives us the main application of that concept.
Are gold and silver treated the same in the Bible, or does each metal serve a unique purpose?
They are, in a way, treated similarly because of as precious, but they have basically different purposes. Because if you look at the availability in the earth, the silver is around 20 times more available, and of course there are technological limitations how much we can extract out of it. So the real ratio of extraction is lower, but basically silver is meant to be used for daily transactions because it's more available. And gold is, because it concentrates the value in a much smaller volume, is used for larger transactions, and it's also is used for wealth accumulation, and it allows for transfer from one generation to another.
Spoiler alert, I think that's why in the book you had mentioned that it's actually silver that's God's money. Yeah, I found it interesting when you brought up the story about Abraham needing to buy a piece of land to bury his wife. He paid 400 shekels. I calculated it out. It came out to today roughly 2,000, just under 3,000 US dollars for a plot of land to bury his wife. Interesting enough, when I searched the average cost of a plot, a burial plot, it ranges between 2 to 5,000. So even from Abraham's time, silver held the value and it carried through all the way to today, which I find pretty incredible. And but also where we look at gold for wealth accumulation and wealth transfer, what is it about gold that enables us to store wealth for generations?
Well, the first thing is that if you think of all the materials that are in the world, uh, all the chemical elements, uh, gold is the only one, and maybe silver as well, but um, gold is definitely the only one where there is someone who owns it. And these are not my words. I heard it from someone else. I just cannot recall who said it, and I don't want to give wrong credit. But someone said that, go every single ounce of or gram of gold in the earth has an owner. There are many tons of rocks and sand and other materials that are unclaimed. But whenever gold, a gram of gold is gained, is extracted, there is always an owner immediately for it. So that makes it very, very special. And then it's all the other elements. We talked about the purity, about the fact that it does not combine with anything else, and it has that durability. You can leave a coin, there are ships that sank 500 years ago, and people are looking for them, try to find them at the bottom of the sea to get out what? The gold. And that is there. Why? Because even if it's on the bottom of the sea, it's a very corrosive environment, and still it shines after 500 years. And this is not attacked by these environments. It goes from generation to generation, and it's also very desirable. It's always, if you have some gold, whenever you wanna sell it, you'll be able to find a buyer for it. Of course, you need to, sometimes it may not be the best conditions for you to sell it, but you will always find a buyer for it. It's very liquid. If you look at the prices think about what you could do 100 years ago with an ounce of gold and what you can do with an ounce of gold today. And exactly what you mentioned, that, it keeps your purchasing power over time. And that's the beauty of precious metals. It's not because they produce a return. It's just that they keep their purchase power.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's move forward to the gold silver ratio. For our listeners who are not familiar with the gold to silver ratio, it basically shows how one metal is valued against the other. So when we hear the ratio is 1 to 80, it means that the value of an ounce of gold is equivalent to 80 ounces of silver. Uh, did you find any mention of the gold to silver ratio in the Bible? I'm curious as to what this ratio may have been in ancient times.
Well, we can probably look at when the Israelites they moved these out of Egypt, and they were building the tabernacle. They were supposed to bring offerings, and it was offering that were brought out of their willing heart, and they brought the quantities they brought. They reflected a ratio of 20 to 1, and that is what we learn. And these exactly on the dot, very, very clear. And that kind of reflects also the geologic estimates, because silver is around 70 parts per billion in the ground in average. Of course, they are more concentrated in certain areas where we have the silver mines. But it's around 70 parts per billion. Gold is 4 parts per billion. So ratio is somewhere around 20. So what they were, the quantities they were bringing as offering out of there without being asked specific what to bring, thousands of years ago, we can see that is the same ratios that they have, that geologists discovered today. At the same time, when the United States was founded, and if you look at the ratio between what was defined as dollars in those times, the ratio is 1 to 15. And that has to do with the fact that even if the ratio in nature would be higher, like closer to 1 to 20, then it's harder to extract everything. And now we have this ratio of 1 to 80 defined in the spot market, which is actually, it's not about physical deliveries of the metals. It's about contracts. So it shows to me that when we talk about ratios like 80 to 1, it shows that silver has a much, much higher potential to come to a closer to what is the natural. I don't know if it will come all the way to 20 to 1 again, but at least if it has a much higher potential to improve the rate in the future.
Okay. I just want to circle back a bit. We mentioned Abraham, cattle, silver, and gold. What did each represent? What did his cattle represent? What did the silver represent? What did the gold represent?
Yeah, it's an economic model, and that shows actually that the things that were written thousands of years ago still have validity today, because cattle, in an agrarian society, people had two things to do. Either they were plant cultivators or they were animal farmers. So cattle is a productive activity. So it shows production. Not only that it sustained the family, it provided food for them, but it also had the possibility to have it growing, because in the beginning, it was a principle was activated that the fruit will contain the seed, which means that everything that was growing will develop to maturity and will produce a fruit that will contain a seed. So all the fact that he was rich, that Abraham was rich in cattle, it shows that he had productive means. At some point, he had too much of productive of food for himself and family. So what he could do, he had to exchange. He needed to exchange the surplus for something that would be non-perishable, that would allow him to buy the things that he wasn't producing himself. And what was that medium of exchange? It was silver. And that is the first time when it's mentioned in the Bible, the word silver, which means, as we said, it means also money. So he used that as a medium of exchange. At some point, he had a lot of silver, and then he was looking for something to transfer into another metal, something that was more valuable, that allowed for concentration, to concentrate the value in a smaller quantity, and that was gold. So that is kind of the wealth accumulation, and that is something that he was able to give it to next generations. So actually, this is an economic model, because you cannot have only two of them. Even if you have a lot of money, and if you don't have a possibility to exchange, if whatever you make is tied to your living expenses, then you have no possibility to expand your life. If you have a lot of money and you don't have the production income, then you cannot sustain that lifestyle. We see it, why 70% of the jackpot winners lose everything in 3 years, because suddenly they have a lot of money and they feel that they are rich and they don't have the income that is coming to sustain the lifestyle they support. And then it's like, if you have the wealth, is if you have only this, but you don't have the wealth to give it to your next generation, then it means that you are not putting your next generations into a better position that you started yourself. So it's an economic model that it is production, exchange or trade, and wealth accumulation. And that is something that is applicable for us individuals, for communities, or for an entire nation.
What does the Bible say with regards to the relationship between money and labor?
The labor has to be paid. The principle is a principle of righteousness, that if you labor, you are worth your labor. It means that you are supposed to be paid. Now, there is, so the Israelites, they've been there for hundreds of years and working as slaves without being paid. So that is when they left, is because with silver and gold, that was their payment. So that's one of the principles, that God never leave anything unpaid. And it may take much longer time than we want, but He's a fair. The principle of fairness is clearly stated, and it's repeated many places in the Bible. So the laborer, whoever works, is worth his pay.
Okay, and compared to the central bank and the money printing going on today, how different would it be if we used gold and silver as money?
I can go directly to the concept of inflation, because the best economic or financial environment is when we have a so-called healthy deflation, which means that the amount of goods and services in economy grow faster than the amount of gold and silver that is used for monetary purposes. And it doesn't have to be a huge imbalance, but it's just a couple percent a year. If the growth rate for goods and services is higher than the amount of money, what happens is that over time, the money is increasing in its purchasing power, that the prices go down. And if inflation is gradual and it's following this process, it's actually very good, because people, all they have to do is save, and then it's a saving automatically produces a return, because what you can buy now or next year, you can buy more next year than what you can buy now. The problem with that, why modern economics don't encourage this, is because in an environment like that, when the prices go down and you maintain your income, what happens is that then you get an extra purchasing power that the government cannot tax. And that's the problem. So rather, the solution is the other one. Let's do all these quantitative easing. Let's explain and make everybody believe that 2% inflation is good. And then, in fact, what happens is that prices increase faster than our income. So we don't notice that difference, because the increase is incremental and is little by little every year. But if you look back 20 years, think that 20 years with 2% inflation, it means 50% decrease of the purchasing power of the money you have.
What would your reply be to people who say that there's just not enough gold in the world to be used as money?
I would to follow Jim Rickards because he said it very clear. He said it's not a matter of how much gold it is. It's a matter of price.
Okay. Speaking of price, is it true that the Temple of Solomon is the most expensive building ever built when measured in today's money?
Yes, and we're looking a little bit in this, and there are different ways of calculating using different references regarding the quantity of gold and silver that was brought to the temple to build it,
Hmm.
and everything is expressed in talents and of gold and talents of silver. And just looking at the numbers, if we translate it to today's values. So gold would be something like 129, 130 million ounces of gold, which would be like 36, 3,700 metric tons of gold. So that's a huge amount of gold.
Yeah.
And silver would be like 1.2 billion ounces, which would be like 34,000, 35,000 metric tons of silver. So it's large amount of metals. And if we multiply with today's prices, we talk about so the value of the gold would be around 170 billion with B, and the value of silver would be a little over 20 billions. That would be today's value.
Oh
So we
my
talk
gosh.
about 200 billions if we accept today's prices on the spot market. So it's very, very expensive.
Am I correct to say that God's Money is the first of many volumes to come, since it covers verses in the Bible from the books Genesis to Judges in volume 1?
Yes, because it's when I started to study the subject, when I put together all the Bible verses that contains make at least one reference to gold and silver, I ended up with over 60 pages of documents. So
Wow.
there is a lot of references, and I started to work, and then after over 1.5 years, I found out that okay, it will take too long and the book will be too extensive to cover everything. So that's why I decided to split it in volumes. So probably it will be, I expect it to be like 5 volumes in total. So
Mhm.
I'm working now on the second volume already, that will be sooner or later will be available on the market.
Okay. Any idea when the next volume will be ready?
I would say probably in another 12 months from now, because
Oh,
it's also the process of editing. And one thing that I discovered is that as I go back and review some things, I get new revelations. And it's like that book was, I had to add one chapter to this book at some point because I found something new reading another verse. And yeah, it is like a never ending story. But I had to, yeah, I have to work and continuous add to things, and will come a second edition at some point.
yeah. Here you completely understand, because every time you read that Bible, it always tells you something new. You read it, you think you know it, you open it up again, and
Yes,
it's telling you
that's
something new. Before we wrap up, can you tell us how we can get a copy of your book, God's Money?
well. The easiest way is of course Amazon. There is where they are sold in the paper copies, and I just have to mention that yeah, you showed already the hardcover,
Hmm.
but what I have also it's a large print version.
Oh, wow.
It's a soft cover, and that's very good as a as a gift for someone in an older generation
Yeah.
because it's large print and it's easy. That can be also purchased on Amazon. I sell it also through my website,
Hmm.
masteringthehumanexperience.com.
Okay.
And if you order on my website, then I'll ship it directly, and it will be a signed copy.
Justine, is there anything else that you would like the viewers to know about?
Well, I can mention that I'm working now on a website, and it's probably 1 month away from launching. It's called Dow to Gold ratio, where I look at the evolution of the ratio between Dow Jones index and gold price for the last 100 years. And I had some very interesting discoveries. And what I'm looking at the how that ratio evolved over time, and there is a cyclicality, a pattern there that is very interesting. And actually, I put on my Twitter. I have a tweet with that graph that is really. I think it's self-explaining. So, but I will go into details in my website. On my website, and I will study all the different ratios on that, and I will try to do daily updates, because the idea is that, okay, how do we identify the moment when these ratio turns, when the trend changes? That's what I'm trying to work on, and that will be probably a discussion for another day.
Can you share your Twitter handle so our interested viewers could follow you?
Yeah, it's my name, first and last name, Iustin Rosioara, and I normally post. I'm not tweeting all the time, but I put things related to mainly to my works, and also that if I have a YouTube channel, Mastering the Human Experience as well, and I'm trying to put there short animation videos that explain the things about money and about currencies and about the nature of why we should use precious metals as money, and so everybody is welcome to follow me.
Okay, it sounds good, because we'd love to have you on again, and we do look forward to Volume 2. Iustin, we thank you for coming on the show, and you take care of yourself.
Thank you.
I'm going to try this one more time. Iustin Rosioara, is that right?
Yeah, that's pretty close.
Okay. That was Iustin Rosioara, who is the author of the book God's Money, an in-depth examination of the Bible verses that mention gold and silver. To find out more about Iustin's work, please follow him on Twitter. And if you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the SBTV channel to be updated on new content. And do also check out the SBTV podcast on iTunes and Spotify.